in a couple of few days. So what I would urge you all to do is follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook by looking for Treco, the recycling company. While we are witnessing one of the worst pandemics of our life, we know for a fact that this is going to be behind us and we will get back up stronger and more resilient. Most of us have somewhere wanted to make a positive impact to the environment while we manufacture, consume, and dispose. And one of the most interesting cases has been that of response consumerism in real estate or the built environment. There's a niche of consumers even today who are willing to pay more for sustainable features like energy efficient appliances, windows, etc. and the like. They want better air quality, etc. So as the younger generations are expected to enter the home buying market, this socially conscious group is looking out for green features and sustainability that is built in. Some of the examples of response consumerism are the biocomposter at Pali, and we could share more details offline, which is in Bandra. Many large societies in Bangalore have started terrace farming and providing near organic produce to the residents, taking care of their wet waste, etc. Many large corporations are looking at ways of implementing circular economy to their waste management to have a smaller carbon footprint, so to speak. So today I have with me three highly learned, experienced panelists with me. Abhishek Banerjee, who's the partner at EY, Raman Iyer, who's Senior VP of project at R Retail, and my dear friend Karan Thakkar, who's the founder and CEO of Treco, the recycling company. While all these guys are Maharathis and they barely need an introduction, let me just quickly take you through their profiles. Abhishek Banerjee is a partner at EY India and leads the risk advisory services practice for real estate, hospitality, construction, and infrastructure in India. With over 17 years of experience of working with leading real estate developers, funds, hotel operators and owners, restaurant operators, leading airlines and shipping companies across India, Middle East and South Asia. He specializes in operational excellence, business risk and controls and project development advisory. Abhishek, wishing you a very warm welcome to the panel. Raman Iyer is a Senior VP of projects at R Retail. This is a Warburg Grunwald Alliance. He is a senior real estate investment and project management professional with over 25 years of experience in private equity, real estate development, asset management, project execution, and controls. He has also facilitated FDI as well as domestic capital infusion in real estate projects, as well as entities and SPVs. Raman, a very warm welcome to you on the panel. Karan Thakkar, my dear friend and founder and CEO of Treco, has over 10 years of experience in waste management and recycling space and has helped some of the largest companies achieve their sustainability goals. Karan plays an important role in bringing awareness and recycling techniques in e-waste recycling and other waste management challenges in India, and is a recipient of many awards, including the Indian Leadership Award. Karan, very warm welcome to the panel.
Thank you so much.
So, ladies and gentlemen, the way this panel will go is all of y'all are kept on mute. Your videos will also be off to save on bandwidth. You see a chat box right at your bottom. I urge you to put in all your questions, whatever they are, and I will try to take up as many questions as possible towards the end of this round. So let's just get straight to it. Abhishek, my first question is to you. Does the real estate design, construction, and process use the principles of sustainability in India, largely reduce, reuse, recycle, remanufacture, etc.? And does that change post-COVID-19?
Thank you, Samad, and good afternoon to everyone. I think everyone will agree that there has been a lot of movement on developing ecosystems and habitats which are energy and in some ways habitat sustainable in consonance with our environment. What has not happened is post the design or the development, the combination of reuse, recycle, and most importantly, a sensitive consumerism when you're living on those habitats. That's probably going to take a while, and that's not happened yet. We have got buildings which are intelligent in terms of energy usage. We have buildings which are intelligent in garbage handling. We have buildings which are now regulatorily forced to segregate garbage and waste. But going beyond that to see how much does the building as a by design enable you and ask of the users to reduce and also to give back. So globally, if you look at there are activists as well as consumers who are asking for basically premises which are going to be what we call as zero net zero. Net zero is net zero energy, net zero water, net zero waste. And finally, probably sometime down the line, and probably a few decades from now, you're going to have buildings which are going to say living buildings, where you will actually give back to the environment more than you are consuming. And that's where we are headed as a global community. Obviously, the country and within the country, some areas are slow to adopt. Government as well as regulatory, mostly municipal and other directives are not very clear, or at least not giving guidance on how we want to adopt. There are countries as well as there are cities in the world where the state and the city and the public have signed up as a community to say that we will reduce our footprints and look at net zero. We do have obviously some projects in India. We have larger projects by some of the developers in the suburbs of Mumbai, where they're looking at creating pedestrian friendly, therefore traffic reducing environments for people to go to work, home, office. There are industrial towns where we are looking at net zero water discharge, or at least getting back more water than giving back more water than consuming. There are factories which are coming up already in under construction already, which is going net zero on energy as well as water. So things are moving, some more than others, but as a coherent approach to development and design of buildings, specifically housing and commercial, we are still at the reduced stage and not so much as reuse and recycle.
Mm-hmm. So, Raman, you are really shaping up the malls in the country, or at least what I read of our retail ventures. Are there any green malls in India, and can and will malls change post COVID-19? Because there are so many terms as far as social distancing is concerned, so many rules and regulations pertaining to that. Very recently, even at the Jodhpur railway station, they had the social distancing recce sort of a thing. So could you just throw some light on how exactly it's going to change post here on?
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. A warm welcome to all our participants on this webinar also. So, like Samad said, with Warburg on this platform, we as Runwal are coming up with a few green projects, particularly in the retail space. Green buildings in the mall space are not an idea which is new. If you look at data, for example, in the US, there are thousands and thousands of buildings which are certified under US GBC as green buildings. These are malls. And like they always say, necessity is the mother of invention. This has come over a period of time because they realized that being green is also being profitable. It adds to the bottom line. So in the US, there is ample data in terms of silver, even platinum certified malls. When it comes to India, for example, a striking example could be the DLF Mall of India. DLF was the first company which understood the benefit of going green. And under the IGBC certification, they are actually platinum certified, which is a very, very big achievement. Now, if you look at their certification, their platinum certification is for existing buildings for the operation and maintenance part. So obviously, it is very clear that they have realized that when in an attempt to go green in the DLF Mall of the building is able to have an efficient air conditioning. Malls are public buildings, so they are energy guzzlers. So by the very nature, malls are not actually green. But if you make a conscious attempt to make them green, it actually adds to the bottom line. So in India itself, we have a bright and shining example, which is the Mall of India. Now, looking malls will be designed, how malls will be operated. See, COVID-19 has given us a wake-up call, not regarding anything, but regarding, how industry has to react whenever there is an epidemic. You will all agree that till now, when we used to ourselves go to malls, we never thought about health and safety requirements with such a big consciousness. But post-COVID, developers are going to think about how they build malls, how they design malls. So these things will start getting ingrained in the basic design principles itself. To give you an example, today when you walk, I mean, prior to COVID-19, when you walked into a hypermarket in a mall, obviously social distancing norms were not being followed. They never had a consciousness in terms of what is the occupancy per square feet occupancy in a hypermarket, or for that reason in the mall, even during a busy festive weekend holiday when the mall is chock-a-block, it's full, But going forward, I think they will be like the lines you see outside immigration counters in the airport. There could probably be a yellow line where you are supposed to stand behind the yellow line, and they'll start maintaining the crowd density in the mall itself. And these principles will start getting ingrained in the design and the operation of malls. So things are going to change. Coming to the commercial development front, of course, there will be a quantum shift there also. COVID-19, as you see, has taught us all to get connected electronically. I'm sure most of the panelists, as well as the participants in today's con call, over the last 1 month would have reached out to their customers, to their team members electronically, either by Zoom meeting, Microsoft Teams, Skype meetings, etc. So these technologies have now become commonplace in our life. Fortunately for us Indians, we are very good at picking up electronics and telecommunication technology. Cellular density in India is one of the highest. So definitely, the demand for commercial space is going to come down. When we go back to industry, after we find a solution to COVID-19, people will realize that they don't need so many office spaces. Hot desking will become the norm of the day. So all these changes are going to be there in the industry. Industry is also wrapping up. We are also, as a company, gearing up for these requirements. Technological requirements in commercial buildings are going to be higher. So all our future developments will have N+1 redundancy as far as internet connectivity is concerned, digital bandwidth and all that. So that is all being industry, and it's all getting incorporated in future designs.
Wow, fantastic. The best sustainability and waste management practices seen globally in the real estate space, and these can possibly be implemented into India? What are the benchmarks, if you will?
All right, good question. I think best practices are all, I would say it's evolving. We need to basically put a target and then work across that to look at where we are versus where the platinum standard in this is. So let me just step back and give you a few examples which are very to the point at this and topical for this conversation. We have a lot of global examples and some Indian examples as well, where a lot of effort has been made into sustainable habitats. Now, the thing that we are saying is, after COVID, do we see this to be more of a norm rather than an aberration or only some people accept it? I think it will become a norm. What we are basically saying is the current situation, scarcity, the more existential questions that have been asked of us as human beings, as communities, as families. For example, Mr. Tata's comments yesterday, though I was not part of the webcast, but he was very categorical and saying that do we really need to look at our urban development, especially how we treat our urban poor, and with the density that we have actually adopted in a city like Mumbai and many of the other slum redevelopment, as well as any other redevelopment projects where the tenements actually get not really very big scale of. So the quality of life is a question, and I think what COVID is doing is making us a little more conscientious. It's making us as consumers a little more wary and curious about what we are doing. And if we can actually merge that and marry that with all the digital stuff, and what Raman said was fantastic, but taking it a step ahead and saying, Raman, beside the food waste from the restaurants, if we can actually tag back on saying, what is the plastic and the paper and the cardboard waste by each retailer in the mall, and for that bringing it back closer home, each household in a building, the data that actually tells us saying what's my personal impact on the environment. I think that when contributed with the design and the regulatory changes that we expect this to bring, especially because of the conscientiousness that is emerging from each and every class of consumers, that married to the design philosophies of architecture will help. To give you an example, I mean, I was talking to someone, and this is something that I've read. Is like, for example, Palava, as the Lodha team has designed a ecosystem where you can walk to a bus stop, you can walk to a school, you can walk to a office within 5 to 10, 15 minutes of your travel time. And so that makes pedestrian movement more amiable. On the other side, you have cities in Paris, the districts getting redeveloped, where the whole idea is to create buildings which will be net zero homes and then net zero buildings, specifically on energy as well as water. They have not yet gone to waste, but at least energy and water, the buildings itself will be net zero. We have cities like San Diego who have already declared an intent to become net zero by 2040 and reduce 75% on the current base of 2015 by 2030, by 75% on water, energy, and waste. So I think sustainability so far has been more about taking things on, basically looking at energy and power consumption, but I think it's going to go beyond because of COVID. To give you an example, a lot of hospitality clients, a lot of owners of large commercial spaces have adopted mechanisms to reduce water wastage, especially in public toilets and wet areas. They've also adopted ways of using green energy. The next step is going to say, how do you really ask questions of the consumers to reduce the consumer related wastage? So if nobody thinks of buying a packaged toy, bringing it home, the toy is going to be used for some time, but the packaging material is going to be thrown out tomorrow. How much of that is getting recorded? Data is being thrown back to the customer and saying, hey, listen, you were actually producing X number of cardboard and Y number of plastic and Z amount of paper or glass. That brings me to another very good example, village in, it's actually a community in Japan, Kamikatsu, which actually at source encourages their people to segregate almost 30 plus items at home.
Wow.
It's not what regulatorily we are mandated today to do dry and wet. They go beyond that. The dry itself has 25, 30 variations, and the wet about 4, 5 variations. And they're doing it purposely and diligently as a community. And against that, what the government and the regulator is giving them is not just property tax benefits, but tax benefits on road tax, parking charges, also on energy cost. For example, the government charges that are there on the electricity supply. So in a way, it is incentivizing. So we need to look at COVID as not just a arouser of conscientious behavior, but also an opportunity for entire stakeholder value chain to rethink what value they can bring by making people adopt better practices and less consumerism as we live our lives. And
that actually gives me a cue for my next question to Raman, which is, what are certain waste management techniques that are currently employed across various buildings, so to speak, because you've also had some experience with residential, commercial, and the entire gamut. And what changes, advances do you predict from here on?
So, I mean, if you look at it, if you want to dissect this asset class wise, if you look at the residential buildings, all buildings, existing buildings, they are trying to retrofit their existing structure so that first of all, they can practice segregation of waste at source. So nowadays, if you walk into a lot of buildings, right from the time you walk into the lobby or you get into the elevator of the building, you will see that the managing committee of the society, they have taken a lot of initiatives in terms of placards, in terms of billboards, in terms of banners that they have put up all across that building, that their facility is a green facility and they follow waste segregation at source and proper treatment of waste. So residential building, it is catching up. Also on the regulatory space, a lot of support is being given by municipal corporations. Everybody is aware that both Mumbai Municipal Corporation, Municipal Corporation of Greater Mumbai, MCGM, as well as Thane Municipal Corporation have proposed reduction in property tax, provided these principles are followed to the T. So a lot of societies are taking this. So in the residential space, this is happening. In terms of new developments, when we design new developments, the architects and the planners are according space for this. So space planning is one area where they are properly earmarking space for storage of electronic waste, for storage of plastic waste, for storage of recyclable waste within the residential complex, within their basements. You know, there are obviously in all these buildings today, you see there is some corner of the building below a ramp or somewhere where it is not utilized properly, and these spaces are being designed and planned for storage of large amounts of waste which can be recycled. Coming to retail buildings and commercial buildings, the ones that we design at our retail, we are giving extra emphasis to waste management, proper waste management. So in fact, you will be surprised that it is obviously a norm as well. We actually design and provide for cold storage space within the mall, because like Abhishek mentioned, a mall typically is very busy as far as the cinemas and food courts are concerned on festive holidays or weekends. So the capacity or the quantum of disposable waste, recyclable waste, food waste, or green waste that is getting generated from the hypermarkets, from the food courts of the mall are very high. They actually peak on weekends, and during the week they are relatively stable. So we have to design. So essentially, we actually design a cold storage room where we can store this, and then it goes into what is called as the organic waste converter. Another trend that we are seeing is, you know, on the statutory side, when you are designing malls or commercial offices, one is you design for what the norm tells you to do. So obviously all buildings, these are large buildings, large projects, so they require environmental clearance. And one of the things that you need to explain to the Ministry of Environment and Forest, to the State Expert Appraisal Committee, is what is your plan for waste segregation and waste management? Because today municipal corporations are coming up and saying, look, your waste is your problem, it is not our problem. Hence, they are actually, in terms of capacity, earlier when I used to probably do with a 1 ton or a 1.5 ton per day OWC, nowadays, in fact, we want to be over capacity on that so that we can cater for that peak capacity. On a Diwali weekend, for example, you'll see just before a Diwali weekend or a Christmas weekend or a Holi weekend, the shopping, both in the hypermarket, even for vegetables and stuff like that, it actually peaks. So we are actually planning and designing for these peak spikes that we see in the malls. So that is already happening. And in office spaces also nowadays, obviously going forward, your customers who take space in office will also be looking at this. And we are already seeing a number of A-grade clients. They have their own checklist before they sign up on a lease for office in a grade A office building. And that checklist does require the entire building to be energy efficient, the entire building to have facilities for the circular economy. So we are already proactively, attending to these issues. And in all future designs, all developers, irrespective, will have to provide for these facilities in their building.
Wow, fabulous. So, Karan, let me bring you into the conversation. As I understand, you have been dealing with a lot of corporates. So you really have your hands and feet on the ground. So what are the on-ground practical challenges in waste management at commercial spaces that you have experienced?
In fact, firstly, thank you, Samarth. And there are so many points that Raman discussed and Abhishek discussed. So I feel that waste management and recycling, I think, has become fashionable only in the last couple of years. I have got a chance and an opportunity to see some of the largest commercial spaces and, IT parks, SEZs over the last 10 years. And I think 80 to 90% is infrastructure that has been, which is old infrastructure. I think there some of the primary issues that I have realized is, first thing is data. The most important thing is to understand that how much waste do you generate for a large commercial complex or for a company or for an industrial park, the amount of waste that they generate and the categories of waste that they generate is very varied. One can actually implement the principles of reduce, reuse, and recycle only when you understand and when you calculate that, this is the waste that I'm generating. Like Raman said, that it could be food waste, which could be 1 or 2 tons on a daily basis. So I think the first step is primarily data and ownership. Many times we've also seen that, say for example, Microsoft. If Microsoft is in an IT park, and if Microsoft is generating electronic waste and other hazardous and non-hazardous waste, then whose responsibility is it? Does a company take its own initiative, its own vendors, and its own policies and drives the waste management initiative, or it is the developer? So one first thing is data, second thing is ownership, third thing is design. A lot of old infrastructure, like I said, I think because it's only in the recent past where even tenants have been asking to ensure that there are waste management practices, because a premium can also be charged by the developer. But I feel a lot of old infrastructure does not have the space to store, to segregate, and to process waste, properly as it should be done. One more point that comes to my mind is understanding of waste. Surprisingly, in a recent conversation, we have started installing cigarette bins, so butts for cigarette bins for cigarette butts in IT parks, because I think for all this while people never realize that it is also something that can harm the environment, because it is a piece of plastic at the end of the day. So understanding of waste. So what I have noticed is that when it comes to hazardous waste and compliance driven waste, companies are proactive, but when it comes to a lot of other categories, there is a little complacency, but I think that is fairly changing now. I think last thing is also about managing. I really feel that a lot of these commercial spaces can actually become role model in a particular area, and I think that should, and I think I see that changing post COVID drastically. Like, if there is an infrastructure that stands out, if you see a 50-acre IT park or a big commercial place in a suburb, and if that drives some waste management initiatives, I think the entire society, I think the entire area, and I think entire fraternity can actually come together and join hands together. But these are the larger challenges that I have foreseen in my experience so far.
That's interesting. So you're saying that the commercial organizations, they could take the lead and the rest will probably follow.
Yeah, and there are some exceptions. Just one thing, if I can add, there are actually a lot of newer facilities that are coming up where I see some fantastic changes and some fantastic processes already being implemented.
Right. So Abhishek, can you just throw some light on LEED certification? Is just having a LEED certification for a building enough? How does the consumer behavior really change by having a LEED certification or not?
I think LEED itself is a beacon, and many people who have adopted it in their development, either in the design phase or even in the operation phase, are obviously showing a higher level of adoption of conscientious behavior towards the environment and towards sustainable development as well as sustainable living. What I believe is the expectation now from after COVID, with what we have seen and how people have appreciated the nature coming back to our backyards, how people have appreciated the whole element of pollution-less living. I think the expectation will be a little higher than what has been the benchmark set from a LEED. To give you an example, there's a practice, there's a sustainable movement, if I can say that, which says that we will actually design zero waste living buildings by 2050. This is called Imperative 2050. And it's obviously started in some ways. You can see it in Georgia Tech in Atlanta. There are buildings which are being built. There are about few of them. I have one, you can check it on Google. It's called the Passover HQ in Tokyo, headquarters in Tokyo, which is about a 9-story building, which has design parameters which enables them to have 46,000 square foot of a garden, which is actually a vegetable and food garden. So basically what I'm trying to say is that there are design parameters which people have already adopted way and above the LEED certification. And to say that my building or my habitat will actually have self-service beacon as generating a certain amount of conversations in how do we do. So I'll give you an example. We go into these large commercial buildings and premises. We call them campuses, and you have large facilities, what we call as landscapes, and you have all good plants and everything. But there's a whole cost that goes in to maintain it. But when it comes to situations where you have a building like this, and they're saying, listen, I produce 200 varieties of vegetable, and I give it back to my food court, which creates food almost at very low cost for the occupiers. Now imagine a large campus, anyone that you have visited or in your work as part of the recycling company, and if they were to convert their large green spaces into actually either planted green food gardens or hypo driven water based hypo what we call it, sorry, I see the word, but hydroponics, yes. So if you actually convert those and convert your rooftops into actually community space for even the occupiers and the neighborhoods to integrate and create a confluence, what you're doing is you're going beyond the lead. Lead doesn't ask you for all this. So what I'm asking for and I'm hoping for is to see that people will be asked to go beyond, and people will do it on their own violation as well, to say that I'm going to go beyond lead and do things which are more sustainable, not just because the lead is a good to do things, but also because I believe in creating environments which are ready for future, enabling more interactive spaces and more emotionally sustainable environments for my occupiers, my stakeholders, as well as my neighborhoods and community that I work in. So this example in Tokyo is one, and we are seeing at least 3-4 other such buildings being built in Asia as well as in Europe, where the community is being encouraged to integrate, use the spaces. You actually have vertical gardens of fruit and vegetable. You have hydroponics on the roofs as well as in basements.
On that note, Abhishek, can I just stop you for a second and just turn to Karan? Karan, on the ground, what exactly are the realities in terms of what are the pain points of the corporates that they are facing to sort of adopt these kind of practices? Like we've heard Abhishek, and he's really thrown phenomenal amount of light as far as what exactly could be done, what is being done globally, what can be done. But if you can just throw some light on what are the pain points.
Yeah, in fact, taking a leave from Abhishek's discussion, like he rightly said, I think in the near future, what will happen is companies would want to see that whether they have a positive impact on environment. So I was reading about Walt Disney Resorts very recently, and how the food waste that is generated from the entire property into a recycling company. The recycling company would convert that waste to energy, and the electricity that is generated is passed on the grid, and in turn the property would again take the same electricity. So what I'm actually doing is I have a positive impact on environment, which is also in a way called circular economy. So in India, largely I highlighted the challenges that companies face. These examples are actually there in India as well. I'm sure there are so many companies who are leading the way. When electronic waste rules were also implemented, it was notified in 2011 and then implemented in 2012. There were a lot of companies who were already doing it. I think largely it is understanding of waste and ownership, like again which has been discussed in this panel today, that it is your problem. Ownership is very important. There is a general saying that out of sight is out of mind. The minute the waste leaves your facility, you feel that I'm not responsible. And when it comes to metal, so if you look at waste is largely hazardous, non-hazardous, dry, wet waste, and it can be broadly categorized in this category. So either either there is waste that you get paid for, or either there is waste that you have to pay for because processing is required. So I think understanding this, capturing data, there is at times, I think also unfortunately a lot of local nexus which companies have to Bangalore and Bombay. I'm sure we all must have heard of. I think it is proactive versus reactive. I think in the recent past, what we have seen is companies are actually coming forward because they have to do it. Some companies are leading the way, but largely it would be these things. I think data is the most critical. I think because the minute you start generating data and you start capturing data, and as an organization, that is what we do. We give a dashboard to a company. You will automatically realize that, okay, I'm generating this much of paper waste, I'm generating this much of plastic waste. Like Raman was talking about, say during Diwali, the food waste goes up. So you can, if there is a cyclical pattern, then you will automatically realize that what are the patterns, what is the trend, how is it affecting the neighborhood. I would really push that, if you go a step forward, some corporates are doing it. Like for example, Pepsi has taken that initiative, that are they do they have a positive impact when it comes to water consumption and giving back to environment. I feel like, for example, even a mall, I think in the near future, I think there will be so much expectation that will rise from people, which is a good thing. I think it's a great opportunity. Not pressurizing you, Raman, but I really feel a lot of these complexes can really lead the way.
On that note, one of the last questions that I've got already quite a few questions in the chat. One last question to you, Raman. Being a civil engineer and having the experience on construction on the finance side, what would be your wish list for the upcoming projects pertaining to sustainability and waste management?
Yeah, so I think a lot has been said in this webinar today, and if you kind of try to pick up points from various points which Abhishek mentioned, which Karan mentioned, the wish list as a consumer in the future, post COVID-19, if I walk into a mall, what would I like to see? I would like to walk into a food court where the operators of the F&B chains are giving me fresh food. The food is grown in vertical gardens within that mall. They are plucking, let's say, they are harvesting easily available garnish material or stuff like that from the mall itself. I would like to walk into malls which are much more greener, because we've all seen the rampant development of malls in India, and malls have have started developing like typically like commercial centers without no life. Abhishek mentioned about live buildings. So we would definitely appreciate a mall which is more greener, where elements of hydroponics are involved, where they not only do the landscaping for the mall to look beautiful, but also to make it look beneficial. I would like to work in an office building where, for example, the oxygen levels in the office building are controlled by plants, and the indoor air quality is much, much, much higher than what the standards prescribe. It is not just about the air conditioning system or an external system which is kind of trying to purify the air and give me conditioned air, but also, productivity actually goes up if you are in an environment where the oxygen levels are high. This is a proven scientific fact. So these are some of the things that I would like to see which get ingrained in the design development of commercial buildings, of offices, of malls, etc. On the regulatory side, if you see, there have been half measures, I would say, on the side of municipal corporations. I think they should, post COVID-19, they should come up more openly and say, look, if you guys are going to have, because waste management is today, it's sucking a lot of their energy. Why do you need conservancy workers to come up and pick up garbage to take it and dump it in a landfill? Those employees of municipal corporations are better serving civil hospitals and government hospitals. They can be put to much better use. So overall, if the government comes up with a tax structure or an incentive structure in such a way that it becomes really lucrative and there is a competition among people to become green friendly, that will improve things, quantum significantly. And last but not the least, I think it's important for each one of us also to change the way in which we do shopping, the way in which we behave. So responsive consumerism is going to be the norm of the day. People are talking about carbon footprints and stuff like that. Each of us will have to, and already I'm seeing that quantum change. Like today in the post-COVID-19 scenario, when you walk into a market, you see a lot of people carrying their own bags. Supermarkets no longer provide plastic bags, so they charge for it, and people are not willing to pay the money. So that is happening. That will go to the next step, where people will realize that if they walk into a mall, into a food court for a party with friends, food waste should be a minimum. They should not be ordering food, and this is seen in Western countries today. They have become more conscious about this, and it's only a matter of time before the Indian consumers are also going to be green conscious. And these are some of my wish lists that I want to see in the near future, so that we live in a better planet.
Fantastic. So just to add to that, Germany actually charges you an extra penalty if you have leftover food and you wasted the food. On that note, I really would want to move on to the questions because I have a ton of them. The first question is, commercial spaces have a higher chance of adopting green infra first. Does energy efficiency run across the entire supply chain for the building process, which is into cement, steel, etc.? Also, I have heard a lot of corrupt practices exist in this space currently. I don't know if you want to throw some light on that, probably Raman.
Yeah, so to answer that question, I think that question came from Pooja Jain. Today, the consumers, developers, and the entire value chain in the real estate development industry is becoming more conscious about this. And it is not, I trust me, when we look at development projects, in fact, we are talking to paint manufacturers with an open heart, and they are actually manufacturing paints which absorb carbon dioxide. So, you're not talking about, you're talking about reducing the carbon footprint. So you have a building which is painted by paint, which is actually absorbing carbon dioxide. And the developers are willing to spend that extra money. So leave alone, the corruption. Reputed developers do not want to get into this practice of trying to buy carbon credits or, certification. They want to see that whatever they are promising, right from the thing that they document in their environmental impact assessment, which is now a public document. Each one of us can go to Ministry of Environment and Forest website, pick up the EIA report submitted by a developer, and with the Right to Information Act, it's become very powerful. It's difficult for corruption to step in. So I think the outlook is quite positive going forward. People are not going to be bullshitting about trying to be environmentally responsible, including developers and the entire value chain. So that's not going to happen. Commercial spaces are going to adopt more and more green practices, be it office buildings, be it malls, and already in residential buildings, we are seeing an uptick in terms of adoption of green practices.
Interesting. So the next question, again by Pooja Jain, is could sectors mobilize to ask state governments or small levels to ask for norms or directions, rather even suggest them? What is the possibility of this happening, as the government post-COVID is just going to be busy in revival? Abhishek, maybe you could throw some light on this?
Well, would have been good if there was somebody from government to answer that. So we can only do a conjecture. But I think, as I said, as a social humanity, I think we have been kind of forced to think, and I think the governments will also be far more proactive and far more receptive to ideas. I don't think that they will be trying to go back to the old normal from here. A lot of good things can and will probably come, and I don't think they don't have the ideas to do. I mean, obviously the Solid Waste Management Act, the subsequent waste set up different waste segregation and waste management plant for construction waste. These have been happening, and these are not things that were demanded by public. There were activists, of course, but as a public motion, I don't think those were asked by. People are still happy to remodel their house and not care about where the dump is going from their garbage. So I only hasten their change, and as well as increase the frequency by which they adopt new measures. What was more essential here is to understand how, as individuals, as families, and as communities, we can adopt practices. And as Raman was speaking, and as Karan was answering the first question, I was just looking at, and I know you don't have the data, and neither do I, but if you actually talk to any of the gatekeepers or any of the suppliers in Amazon or Flipkart, and ask them in the large campuses on a daily basis, packages do they deliver in this office? For charge 5 rupees or 10 rupees per package to say, boss, I'm going to manage this paper waste that you want to generate and throw in your dustbin, but you need to pay for it. So that conscientious behavior will also need some amount of reward and recognition, as well as flack for not following. If there's a guy or someone who's ordering 10 packets a month, if he suddenly says, boss, I have to pay $1,000 for the garbage handling of those packets, he will be probably thinking more and say, how do I really buy this? But right now, there's no, I don't think that's happening. And same thing goes at home. Thankfully for us as a nation and as communities, there is per capita food waste and wet waste is still very low compared to the world. But given our sheer numbers, the volume that we generate is pretty high. And our ability to convert that, less than 80%, less than 20% actually end up in a way that it can be converted to energy. Forget the 80% that's getting wasted in various forms and between homes to the yards where you're actually segregating. There's a whole waste, and there's also a value chain, right? A lot of recycling is happening in a unscientific, orthodox ways, where you have the Kurlas of Bombay and some districts in Delhi where you actually break down your refrigerators and vehicle waste and all kinds of waste is recycled in some form or the other, which is not really the scientific way to do it. So I think stepping back, regulator will do things. They will be more proactive and receptive, as I said. Working back and ensuring our waste is conscientiously and scientifically managed.
Yeah. So, you know,
Right. So, sorry, Karan.
I'll just add one thing here. A lot of industry bodies, so I'm a part of CII of the Green Co body. I think a lot of industry bodies are coming up together and showing proactiveness and telling the government that, you know, we are with you. And I think currently we are all in this together. So I think there is a lot of that is already shown for a lot of companies, and of course the buck stops at us, and I think individually we have to change a lot of things. But I feel that a lot of companies who take a lot of responsible measures will also have a lot to win in this downturn. So as an organization, if you come out more sustainable and, you know, contributing to the society, taking practices, because I think this is also a time where to reboot and you know, press the accelerator.
Right. So moving on, Mr. Raman, would alternative for centralized air conditioning like radiant cooling be recommended, as it reduces energy cost and improves the indoor air quality? And the second question to that is, would you suggest a biogas plant to manage the food waste you generate at malls?
Yeah, so I think, you know, to answer that question, if you look at a number of office buildings, radiant cooling is getting ingrained into the design of office buildings itself. A classic example I recollect is one of the corporates which I used to work with, ICICI Bank headquarters in BKC. They had this huge fountain in the atrium. So the whole purpose of having these kind of devices are basically radiant cooling devices, because architects on the one hand, to bring up opulent designs, they design double height and triple height lobbies, entrance lobbies, you know, to bring in the grandeur of the structure. Now, when you have to cool such a huge volume of space, the air conditioning, with conventional air conditioning, your energy bill is going to shoot up the roof. So in all our designs, we actually do an energy audit at the time of design of the HVAC system for malls. The atriums and the lobbies of malls are again huge volumes of space which have to be cooled. So when we do an energy audit, and we also do peer review for these kind of designs, where a number of times it has come back to us that why don't you put a fountain over here, or why don't you put a water body over here? These are essentially radiant cooling devices which try and reduce the energy consumption for cooling such large volumes of air in conditioned environments. So that is something that I'm seeing that is happening today. We incorporate that in a lot of our designs because it saves us the money. Today, operation cost of buildings are more important than the capital expenditure, because a grade A asset is going to be with a developer for 10, 15 years. So they not only look at what they're going to put up on the project front to build that project, they also are going to put up what are the technologies I'm going to incorporate so that my common area maintenance charges that I'm going to charge my tenants are going to be least. And we have to be competitive in these areas so that we are actually picked up against the odds that we have. And today the market, as you know, post-COVID is not going to be very great. The real estate market is already, the vacancy levels are very high. Unsold inventory of residential spaces are very high. So that's going to happen. On the biogas bit, yes, I think that would be kind of a wish list, because if you look at, again, if you look at a food court of a mall, there is a kind of a circular economy that is going over there. There are hypermarkets which sell vegetable waste. There are food courts which generate food waste, and a very small compact biogas, and it's very easy to find out space for a biogas plant in a large mall project. Putting up a small compact biogas plant will produce methane gas, and the methane gas can be sent back to the F&B restaurants for heating their food. So there is a very, very likely possibility, though I have, honestly, to be very frank with you, I haven't seen a single mall in India which operates a biogas plant because of the smell issues. But if rightly planned, I think that can be incorporated.
You want to take a look.
Yes, correct.
So, Katie, you wanted to say something?
One thing, Raman, I think a fantastic idea. So biogas is one option, but so I've seen the K. Raheja IT park in Airoli. What they have done is they have actually used the food waste, done composting, and that they have used to build a butterfly park.
Wow.
So I think there are so many options with that, and I mean for a mall, I mean for all you know that you can attract a lot of visitors like this. That's a free idea I'm giving you, but
good upscaling idea. So I've been getting a lot of private messages also, so I'm just going to read out a few of those. Are we heading towards life in a minimalism, or are we heading towards moral upgrade for product owners to add more of design thinking and add more reuse, reuse, recycle, remanufacture sort of a thing? So open to all, whoever chooses to answer.
So I just think that, I mean, if I can just share my bit is minimalism is good, and I can see the trend changing a lot at an individual level, and because I think the results are right in front of us, the worst and the best in such a short span of time with the lockdown. If we see such great positive impact on environment, doesn't it show us that actually nature is so beautiful, environment is so we are a part of environment, and it can be so rewarding, and it is a much more beautiful sight than what we see every day. I remember seeing some pictures being floated on WhatsApp of Bombay city, a city so beautiful, right? And it's not necessarily that somebody had to lock us down in our house to see such a view. So I think even products at an intrinsic level, I think if there are a lot of complex products in the market. I think the reason why a recycler exists is because there are products which are manufactured which cannot be recycled. Say for example, even a sanitary pad or a cigarette butt, or there are so many things. Even electronic waste contains hazardous substances that needs to be treated the right way. So I think right from manufacturing to the supply chain, and then at the end of it, the last mile, the destruction, I think things do need to change. And I think this definitely, hopefully, should change the things that we interact, the manner in which we interact with the environment, the manner in which we consume, the manner in which we dispose. I think, like Raman said, that I think the minute the 5 rupee thing was introduced for a plastic bag, we could spend 100 rupees more on the shopping bill, but a 5 rupee extra to pay for something that was free otherwise. I think it just changed the thought process. So, but I'm optimistic. I think things should change from here.
Right. So, in terms of percentages, what is the waste generated from corporates versus malls versus the rest of the local vicinity? Do you have any kind of data on this?
Yeah. So, for example, on an average day, I'm not talking about the spikes that we see on a festive weekend or pre-festival shopping. On an average day, almost 80% of the waste generated in a mall gets recycled. And so basically there are 3 or 4 methods by which it is done. All the packaging material, which is basically paper waste, a lot of the cartons and stuff like that, they get collected in designated places within the malls. And there are paper recycling companies who are there on the roster, on the directory of the mall. They are called and they take up that waste. The food waste, it is not only by statute, but even as a part of their corporate social responsibility, all mall operators today have organic waste composter, OWCs. So all the vegetable waste and the food waste is getting digested over there. And we have a lot of technology providers who have come up with technology where the food waste can be digested in a properly designed OWC with the right temperature, even within 24 to 48 hours. So that you're talking about a ton of food waste getting digested. It's like a machine with a tummy of its own. It just converts that into manure. And a lot of this manure is going back into municipal gardens, into, creating that beautiful city of Mumbai, which Karan was mentioning about. So that I think then that can be more and more encouraged. As it is, we see in a lot of our malls, there is an active participation of the municipal corporation. There are officers of the municipal corporation from various departments. Going forward, obviously, you will see a lot of the health department guys coming in to ensure that the malaria and the dengue outbreaks are not there, and something similar to COVID-19 doesn't come up. So at that time, obviously, they can also do a proper audit, and there can be a database and data generated in terms of, and verifiable data. That's very critical. That can be there.
That is something that FECO is trying to attain by coming out with these dashboards of, what is the kind of waste that is being generated. And hopefully, as Abhishek mentioned, that 30 plus different kinds of waste is something that we can segregate in the future. So one of the last questions, because we've just barely got 3 minutes more left. Karan, as far as biomedical waste production is concerned, it's only going to increase post-COVID. So how will that be integrated, or are there plans of integrating that in some way into the waste management stream?
So for all this while, all the biomedical waste that was generated by the healthcare facilities had to be mandatorily given to a common waste treatment facility, which was so as per the guidelines, it has to be anything that is available within 75 kilometers. You have to give it to them. So there is SMS Envocare in Bombay, which takes care from Govandi to the western suburbs, and then there is Ramki waste facility. But I think in the COVID situation, what has been noticed is, I think everything that comes out of a hospital, it could be food packets or it could be absolutely everything, is infected waste. So we can call it infected waste, biomedical waste, infected waste. And we are not equipped. In fact, recently there was an article in the newspaper that I think Bombay as a city alone generates 1,500 kilos of biomedical waste every day. And not everything is treated. If I remember the percentage, it could be around 30 to 40%. So I think this is again an eye-opener. In fact, it might just surprise everyone. There are 7 states and union territories which does not have a common waste treatment facility. So I'm wondering, so Bombay still has, but what happens to these other states and other places where there is no such incineration process? So I think this is definitely a challenge. And in fact, in one of the calls with Raman and Abhishek earlier and with so many other experts, hopefully it does not happen. But if something of this happens again, then we are definitely not equipped to take care of such hazardous and such infected waste. But things will change. So far it was being sent. I think very soon there's a solution is required where if you can treat most of it in some or the other manner on site.
I think you two are working on some sort of an incinerator for these kind of biomedical waste. Is that right, Karan?
Yeah. So we are trying to build some portable incinerator which can be installed by companies and hospitals. And if it works well, then it can be used across offices and residences also.
Fantastic. So on that note, ladies and gentlemen, we are at 16:59. It's perfect timing, about an hour. Thank you very much for joining in. Do follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube. Just look up THRECO, that is THRECO, the recycling company, and you'll find us there. You'll probably find our videos there. Share, subscribe, like, and participate. Have a conversation with either of us whenever you feel the need to. Thanks a lot, ladies and gentlemen.
So one trivia for everyone. Glad, of course, sharing this space with Raman as well. But Abhishek and I, we have worked together in KPMG in the past, and so I think fantastic sharing this space with him as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.